Hello, everybody!
About a month ago, I made a video about inclusivity in South Park. My goal was to explain how making fun of minorities can actually be very inclusive, because this makes you see marginalized groups as equals. And South Park does that better than every other show that I know. For the most part, people agreed with the video, but there was one thing that came up in the comments multiple times: transphobia. There were a bunch of people that pointed to one episode in particular, which they viewed as very problematic. Season 9, Episode 1, Mr. Garrison's fancy new vagina.
Do I look like a woman? Pretty much.
This got me wondering, because I always remembered South Park as a pretty progressive show when it came to gender identity. But it had also been a while since I watched the episodes that discussed this issue. So today I want to revisit the 3 South Park episodes that focused on transgender related issues the most. The infamous Mr. Garrison episode, Season 18's take on gender appropriate bathrooms, and Season 23's episode on trans athletes. I'm actually very excited about this, because I think these are some of the most interesting episodes there are. But before we dive into it, let me say one more thing. I know that transgender identity is probably one of the most controversial topics you can discuss. My whole take on it is actually quite simple. The world isn't great right now, and a lot of people have it really tough. Men, women, young people, old people, every group in our society seems to get lonelier and more depressed about the future. So I'm very thankful for all the people that keep spreading happiness and positivity, no matter if it's through great art, comedy, or just smiling while walking around in public. I think that's what the world needs right now. More happy people. And if some individuals are more happy with themselves, their bodies, and the world, if they are able to transition to another gender, then I think that's great for all of us. That's my standing. And you're definitely allowed to think differently and share your thoughts on everything I'm going to discuss in this video. But please just keep in mind, for your own sake, that in order to reach people and educate them, don't treat them like they are your enemy. Anyway, with that being said, I, a 20-year-old white cis heterosexual male, will now discuss transgender representation in a cartoon. That's something I've always wanted to say.
This is what your transgender progressive thinking gets you? Now your son wants to be transracial.
Can I have $3,000, Mom and Dad? Huh? Can I?
Okay, Season 9, Episode 1. That's actually a tough one. A person in my comments summarized it pretty well, stating, "Some of these episodes are so bad that they start using allegory in the same level of bad as Ben Shapiro. For example, saying that the idea of someone transitioning to another gender is comparable to someone changing races or species." And yeah, that's actually what this episode does. Mr. Garrison, I would say the most extreme and deranged character next to Cartman, has a sex change. This leads to Kyle wanting to have a necroplasty to become tall and black in order to be a part of the basketball team. And if that wasn't enough, Kyle's dad additionally decides to become a dolphin.
Look, Ike, your daddy's a dolphin.
A dolphin?
So basically the argument this episode discusses is, if I can change my sex with a surgery, because what I feel like on the inside doesn't match how I look on the outside, couldn't the same thing be applied to race or species?
Excuse me, where do you have special seating for dolphins?
This sounds really bad, and I see why this premise in itself is disliked by many. But the way I read it, the episode first and foremost discusses optical surgery. And the point it is trying to make is that an operation can make you look like a woman, or a dolphin, or a black basketball player, but it doesn't actually make you one. And I think that message could theoretically be interpreted in a very progressive way. If we apply the logic that changing your looks doesn't make you something automatically, this raises the question, what does define you? In a bizarre way, this episode actually taught me that simply having breasts and a vagina aren't the defining attributes of a woman. And from this point forward, you can take the argument in 2 directions. Either you say, a biological male will simply never be able to become a woman, no matter how much he tries. Or you can say, identity isn't tied to your physical attributes. It's something mental. And what you can definitely criticize is that the episode leaves this argument open. It just ends on the note, Looking like something doesn't make you something, and that's it. So while I don't perceive it as openly transphobic from a gender identity perspective, it definitely ridicules sex change operations in a one-sided way, which can partly be attributed to its release date. 2005 was simply a very different time.
Oh, you, a child? You know I'm a lady, don't you?
No.
There are probably some more things that could be said about Mr. Garrison's future appearances as a woman, but in my prior video I already said that Mr. Garrison is simply a character you don't want your social movement represented by. He sucks, and it's a shame that, unlike with gay people for example, you don't really have any positive transgender counterparts to him. What we did get though were 2 more very interesting episodes about gender related topics. And there's also the running gag with the trans celebrity Caitlyn Jenner in season 20 that repeatedly mocks her appearance, but I would say that's the kind of inclusive bashing of minorities I talked about in the last video. For example, they mocked Sarah Jessica Parker, a cis woman, at least as much for appearance, if not more. South Park in general just doesn't respect celebrities, and I like that about the show.
Hey, look, Tom Cruise has semen on his back.
What did you say? I guess maybe Tom Cruise likes semen.
Anyway, finally I can talk about season 18 episode 3, The Sissy. I can say with no doubt that no other episode had more influence on me than this one. Not only did it educate my 12-year-old self on terms like cis, trans and gender, it also got me into Lorde and therefore massively influenced my taste in music.
I don't want a separate place. I need to feel safe. I'm thrown away, and I will put.
But this episode is so much more than just Lorde, which is why I don't understand that it never was brought up in the comments on my prior video. From the outside, The Sissy is a story about toilets. Cartman hates the boys' bathroom, therefore he starts identifying as trans to use the girls' bathroom. The girls have a problem with that, since they don't want to share their safe space with somebody that seems to only have transitioned to get into that space. Therefore, the school decides to give Cartman his, or her, own bathroom, which in turn upsets Wendy, since she understandably doesn't want Cartman to win with such a strategy. Therefore, she also starts identifying as trans, to get access to Cartman's new bathroom. All these gender identity issues then confuse Stan, who seeks advice from his father, only to find out that Randy is pretty much doing the same thing as Cartman. The key difference between Randy's Lorde persona and Erica is that he, or she, is offended when her employee suggests she should get her own special bathroom.
Being able to use that bathroom is critical to my identity, to my music.
My girls are big fans of your music, Lord, but the women here aren't comfortable sharing a bathroom with...
With what?
This all culminates in a great song montage in which most characters start to reflect on the events of this episode. The genius, in my opinion, is that all this discussion about toilets can be seen as an allegory towards how society discusses trans identity in general. And it also gives us the answer to why this topic is so polarizing. It's because there is no objective solution. Regarding the toilet situation, letting transgender people use the bathroom of the gender they identify with could easily be abused by people like Cartman, who would destroy these safe spaces for women in particular. Adding special bathrooms for transgender people, on the other hand, could make them feel excluded and not accepted in their chosen identity. Same thing with forcing them to use bathrooms of their biological sex. Even with my preferred solution, abandoning gender separation of public bathrooms entirely, I still have to admit that this would make some people justifiably feel less safe. It's simply not possible with issues like these to satisfy everybody, which is why there is a culture war being fought over them.
Trans porn on your phone. That's all they keep talking about. And
you know, I saw a couple news articles about that. It's ridiculous. I was like looking up some reporter we're trying to hire today and punched in some number and it popped up porn on my phone. Everybody's had porn pop up on their phones.
We are in a culture war because of complexity. And instead of acknowledging how impossible it is to solve these problems without sacrificing something else, most people who deeply care about these issues just insult each other on Twitter. So insane, man. Anyway, all the things I just said basically apply to season 23 episode 7 as well. They discussed the problem of biological men entering women's sports with the example of the trans athlete Heather Swanson, who similarly to Cartman and the bathrooms, transitioned only to be able to beat women. This episode again tries to highlight the nuances and difficulties of finding an objective solution to problems like these. That's basically it. And with that in mind, what's fascinating about all 3 episodes I discussed in this video is that none of them really gave answers. With most topics discussed in this show, either Kyle, Stan or Cartman at one point held a conclusive speech about them, something that is noticeably absent in the transgender episodes. I think that's because the creators of this show don't know themselves how to handle these issues. They don't know what to do with transgender bathrooms or transgender athletes. And that's okay, because what they did do was present the complexity of these issues. And I think that's already worth a lot. And even though they didn't answer most questions they raised, I think the question whether South Park is transphobic or not was answered in this scene.
Because when someone's not allowed to express who they are inside, then we all lose. That's what I would say to Lord.
I'm really happy to have made this video, and I'm very thankful for everybody who took the time to watch it. Thank you. Feel free to share your opinions if you want, and if you want to learn more about transgender identity, I recommend this video from ContraPoints. She is actually trans, so probably more qualified to talk about all this. Anyway, thanks again, like and subscribe if you want to, and have a nice day.
Really? Somewhere where I can just live out my days in peace and quiet? Oh, please, can you show me where?
We'll do better than that. We'll help you get there.